So I have the great pleasure of hosting Professor Lee Cronin. So Professor Cronin, thank you so much for your time and for doing this podcast.
You're welcome. Nice to meet you.
So I would like to start our discussion with the first question. So basically, what inspired your fascination with understanding the origins of life?
I think that a number of important things. First of all, the fact that living systems seem so natural but unnatural at the same time. If you take the Platonic universe and the universe that we are kind of uh, seeing in biology, and I guess just the autonomy of them. I mean, I remember as a kid seeing ants crawling around, communicating, moving leaves, or a seed sprouting, into a plant in a crack in some concrete. Just the autonomy of biology and the fact that biology is able to thrive virtually everywhere on Earth, in the most inhospitable places. And just trying to understand, as a chemist and then as a physical scientist, that what is in the stuff that makes it alive. Because clearly, there's more information in the object than there first appears, right? If you imagine a seed and how a seed grows, so it's just generally fascination with the process of life, the way that we interpret life, and also the way that we think of life as emerging from biology, without really understanding its roots in chemistry and in physics. And then on the flip side, how physics doesn't think that life is extraordinary at all. It's just part of the universe.
Right. And can you please explain the concept of assembly theory and its implications for detecting life?
Okay, yeah. So assembly theory was initially conceived of as a life detection system. And so I guess the question is pretty simple. The question is something along the lines of, well, let's lay some groundwork. First of all, assembly theory asserts that complexity cannot arise spontaneously in any abundance in nature. And that means that if there is, just in a universe where there is no life or technology, the objects with a very high complexity, that is a large number of irreducible parts, cannot just spontaneously form if you have a large number of copies. And then if you then take that to chemistry, it's easy to say, oh, a complex molecule, if you detect many identical copies of a complex molecule, then you can start to be sure that that complex molecule is a signature of a living or technological system. So kind of the assembly theory kind of was built to kind of measure that. So assembly theory predicts that if you measure an object in the environment that is complex and abundant, that object must have been generated by a living process or a technological process. And that is kind of assembly theory in a nutshell. I can break the theory down in terms of the mathematics and the measurements and the other bits, but that's really it. Assembly theory says it's about measuring complexity and abundance. And it says that living systems, or its hypothesis, if you like, its test is that living systems create complex objects at scale in abundance.
I see. And what do you think is the minimal set of conditions required for life to form, and how close are we actually to creating synthetic life in the lab? And finally, what does that mean for our understanding of natural life?
Oh, well, there's a lot of questions there. I think when so assembly theory was meant to be a detection system. So we go back a bit. I mean, I've always wanted to try and make a kind of inorganic biology. I said this many years ago at a TED talk, right? I said, oh, well, it can't take more than a couple of years to do. And then I thought, if you find the conditions, it's not that complicated to basically do. Chemistry is a very short, very fast in general, right? And I thought, well, if you got the conditions right, you should be able to get towards a lifelike system relatively quickly. But I realized when I was starting to work on that, I had no idea what I was looking for. Is it a cell? Is it DNA? Is it some entropy beating process? So I was like, oh gosh, I want to make life in the lab, and I think it should be easy, like a couple of years, but I have no idea what theory to use. I have no model. I have no detection system, and I have no experiment. And and I said, oh, okay, maybe what I need to do is I need to basically come up with a hypothesis about what life might be, or how that can be turned into a model, then generate a model, then run a simulation and make a prediction that I can then test in an experiment. And so that's where that came from. And so I figured that by measuring what living systems look like on Earth, and then asking, is there a cutoff between abiotic systems and living systems, would be the first question. And then if I simply create an environment which chemistry can occur, and perhaps some type of inorganic evolution, that we might start to see things coming up this staircase towards life. So then that would then allow me to say, well, okay, I need to think about what this would look like in my lab, but I have to be careful that if I build a system that is living, let's say I build a synthetic cell, I buy some DNA from a company that makes DNA strands, I get some cell-free extract, I get some lipids, and if I put them together and make a life form, have I made life? Well, yes, I've made a life form if that was possible, but that doesn't really tell me anything about the origin of life, because the origin of life required no me. And so what I'm trying to do in the lab is create conditions that you might have found on the early Earth, or that you might find elsewhere in the universe, for complexity to arise when there is no prior complexity. So what we're really doing is saying, under what conditions does complexity spontaneously come into existence and sustain itself? So I think the answer to that is, firstly, it looks like complexity cannot really arise in physics, or as in the standard model, that those particles, because there's just not enough of them, right? But physics helps us out, because from the standard model we can generate all the elements in the periodic table, and the elements in the periodic table is the realm of chemistry. And so as long as the elements have been produced by a star explosion or something like this, then you have a load of stuff, a load of material. And from that material, because you can make all the different bonds and there's a vast number of potential molecules that could be made, the system, if there's sufficient amount of energy and time and mixing, because you need to mix everything together, complexity might start to generate, because you'll get a very basic evolutionary process. And that's kind of my starting point for what I'm building in the lab, what it is, and where it can manifest. So I think you asked three questions there, and I think I've answered three of them. So number one, what is the medium which life will occur? Well, let's just copy Earth and say chemistry, bonds. How do you make life? Well, sand in a pot and shake it with lots of heterogeneity and hope for selection to occur. And how do you know there's life? Well, measure the assembly index, or the assembliness of the system, using a detector. And so if you can imagine you've got a large hadron collider like experiment where you're looking for this, that might be a reasonable way of doing it. What I mean by large hadron collider, I mean a very large experiment, lots of chemical reactors, lots of sensors, and people carefully modeling what's likely to happen.
In what ways could artificial life redefine our understanding of biology and chemistry?
Well, I think that, my view on this is evolving all the time, because my understanding is changing all the time. But I think that life tells us something not just special about biology and chemistry. It tells us something special about the universe and physics and the nature of time. And this makes everybody angry, and I'm sorry, but it's a natural conclusion of this, and people can dispute it, and it doesn't matter, right? It's just my opinion. Uh, but um, the amount of time that you need to elapse to produce complexity is not insignificant. So what am I saying? I'm saying that for life to emerge in the universe, time is a resource like chemical bonds and energy. And time has to be used like energy, right? And space. And time has to elapse so the universe can try different things. It might try things in parallel and make it easier, but this is super important. And one of the things I realized is that about the way the living systems are actually evidence that time is fundamental. And I think that's a very nice line. Living systems or life is evidence that time is fundamental. Why? Because in a timeless universe, there's not sufficient complexity potential for life to emerge, which blows my mind.
And what would you say? What role does water play in the emergence of life? And are there any viable alternatives to water?
I've no idea. I mean, the thing is, it's a bit like saying what role does RNA play on the emergence of life? I mean, on Earth, at one atmosphere and roughly 25 degrees Celsius or 298 Kelvin, water's a very good medium. It is polar. It can be acidic. It can be basic. It can be heated up to a relatively high temperature range before it boils at one atmosphere. And it has incredibly good properties for dissolving salts and some organics. But does that mean there's not another solvent on another planet? I don't know. Let's take supercritical CO2. CO2 is an amazing solvent if you can put it under enough pressure, right? And so the fact that we're kind of obsessing about water being critical for life, it just merely says we don't know what is possible beyond Earth. And so I would say I see no reason why water is critical for complexity, but it's very convenient. And I can imagine there's many other life forms in the universe that are also using water because it's just everywhere. It's great for dissolving up inorganic materials. But are there other solvents I could think of? I mean, like dichloromethane, THF. These are chemicals that we know of, like dry cleaning chemicals, which are super interesting. And they're relatively simple molecules. They could exist in the universe in some abundance. But in our solar system, at least, we have a lot of water on Earth, on Europa, on Enceladus, and on Titan.
Right. And how do you approach the question of whether life is a universal phenomenon or just a rare event?
I think that's the wrong question. I think life is merely the product of selection in time. And I think the selection goes everywhere in the universe all the time. And so now that doesn't mean there isn't some pretty extraordinary phase transitions that happen in life, right? When you get the transition to evolution and then autonomy and then basically cellularity and then multicellularity and then sensing and intelligence and language and culture and abstraction and mathematics and so on and so on and so on. That's pretty damn amazing. But all of that is just selection. I was going to say that I think selection is a fundamental property of stuff that happens in the universe when you have heterogeneity. But I wouldn't say anything else, right? Because we're still too early. My guess, if I make the analogy with our sun, how weird is our sun? Well, our sun is actually not the most common type of star. I think red dwarfs are more common than our sun. Our sun is less common. And so, there's the amount of hydrogen, the time it took to undergo ignition and so on, and nucleation for our sun. So I think that we are biased by what we observe. And so I just have no data. But my guess is it looks like where you have heterogeneity, i.e., you have different elements, solid material, to working together, and maybe water is important for helping stuff move around because it might be very convenient, then you will have some selection. And where you have some selection, you have the possibility of building complexity, autocatalysis. And where you can build autocatalysis and complexity, you're invariably going to get to some life form eventually, I'm going to guess. I don't think life is very improbable. I think that the amount of time that has elapsed between the emergence of life on Earth and now means that there's a lot of contingency. And that contingency looks improbable because it is, right? There's no other life in the universe like Earth. But that doesn't mean there isn't life everywhere.
And do you think that life on Earth could have originated elsewhere in the universe? And how does your work help us understand the potential for life on other planets?
Huh. I mean, sure, life could occur anywhere in the universe, but then if we're saying that the origin of life occurred somewhere other than Earth, that's fine. But where and how, and why? And is that not just merely kind of trying to invoke some other phenomena, right? And I guess that life that's emerged on Earth is very bound to Earth. We have evolved on it. So I would say it's unlikely that life emerged in space because life on Earth is evolved on Earth with a contingency of 1G, all the physical properties, the abundance of the elements, and so on. So I think we don't really need to invoke a mechanism for life elsewhere. That doesn't mean to say that some of the building blocks may be made more convenient from outer space. But I think that there is potential, there's enough stuff and time for life to have emerged on Earth because chemistry is not that well, chemistry is, what am I trying to say? Chemical reactions are relatively simple, but the formation of biology is where the time gets laid down.
I see. And what do you think about the existence of extraterrestrial life? And possibly, could we already maybe have missed signs of extraterrestrial life due to our biases in searching for carbon based organisms?
Yeah, I think certainly we don't know how to generally look for life in the universe, so it's likely we're missing it. What is the prospect for extraterrestrial life? I don't know, but the prospect for selection in the universe is 100% everywhere. So, if there's selection everywhere, and selection through gives you some kind of inorganic evolution, which then gives you complexity and then gives you autonomy, then by extension, I think there's life pretty much everywhere. But I don't know what type of life: intelligent life, instinctual life, single cellular life, entire planets that are alive. I think that there's a lot to play for. But given that we are only at one example right now, it's kind of annoying to kind of guess what it's going to be. But my guess would be there's life everywhere. It's probably simple, but actually, the emergence of intelligence is probably also quite simple, just related to um, living systems trying to develop better ways of solving problems to survive. That's all intelligence is there for. Intelligence helps us survive, or maybe sometimes kills us as well.
Okay, and what would the discovery of non-DNA based life basically mean for science and society? And how close do you think we are to understanding how life emerged from non-living matter?
Huh. Um, I think potentially we're getting closer. We get to understand the phase transition thanks to assembly theory. Um, I find it very hard to make predictions because when I make them, particularly when I put them online, right, like this, I'm always wrong, and I'm happy to be wrong. That's really that's the great thing about my predictions. My predictions are incorrect, but I think that we have hints right now of what it looks like, the phase transition that is, and I think that there is an effort that should go on now to basically start to say, is selection enough to get us to biology? And I think the answer has to be yes, because I don't believe in magic, nor God, nor anything else. So I think that you know, I think that we are going to hopefully get towards solving that problem in my lifetime, if not a little bit after, but it may take longer. I don't know. But it's worth trying.
Right. And do you think that life can be defined just from a chemical perspective, or do we need to include biology and physics to explain life in total?
Um, I wouldn't even define life from a chemical perspective. I would just say living systems are characterized by their ability to generate complexity at scale as a definition, because it's so it catches everything. There are no gotchas. Whereas when people try to define life, they try to put a legalistic, semantic kind of set of labels. You have to have these features to be alive, and then you would ask things like, well, what is a virus? Is that alive? And what is a motor car? Is that alive? And what about a zombie? That people kind of really got themselves um, kind of confused. And the thing I like about what we've been doing with assembly theory and being open minded is that confusion is removed, and therefore life can emerge, I guess, in lots of scales. But at the end of the day, the base level is chemistry, because chemistry is the base of causation in the universe, right? If you wanted to make life in photons, but the photons would have to be emitted for something. It would be a solid substrate. So at the end of the day, although physics helps us explain the matter in the universe, chemistry helps us explain all the complexity in the universe. And biology is what comes out of chemistry when evolution has occurred. I think it's another good line. Biology is what happens to chemistry when evolution has occurred. And then from that point of view, if the biologist then makes a motor car, sure, the motor car is not really now evidence of biology on its own, but it is a complex object. It was made by a living system. And what is the difference between a motor car and the biologist basically having, you know, an eye or a kidney or something like this?
Right. And what would you say is the significance of detecting complex molecules in space for, let's say, the field of astrobiology?
Well, I think the field of astrobiology is a complicated field. In that I would say there are many people there who are not really doing, um, how can I be polite? I mean, they're not doing serious science, right? And what I mean by that, and it's not a criticism, it's a statement of I see lots of ideas being thrown around and no a a common language being there. So it's kind of pre-paradigm. And what I love about astrobiology is the fact is this vast community of lots of enthusiastic people looking for new ideas for life and astrobiology. So that's great, wonderful. However, if the community doesn't coalesce around some hard questions aim to get to tackle some look at the phenomena, then it's going to remain rather inconclusive, and therefore it's hard for us to build missions to go to the outer solar system or experiments if the astrobiologists are just generating stuff based on conjectures that aren't really good science. So what I would like to do is I would like to shift astrobiology as a discipline from this, hey, look at all this, we're so kind of wide, we've got all these cool people involved, that's great. Now what we need to do is focus and agree on common problems that need scientific experiments to address them, and experiments and models and theory, and then use those together and evaluate and criticize each other's experiments, models, and theories to then get better and go up. Right now, it's kind of like um, people just writing papers which are highly romantic and conceptual, but aren't ever testable.
Hmm. And how do you distinguish between chemical systems that are alive and those that merely mimic lifelike behavior?
So, what do we mean by mimicry? It's like occasionally human beings are very good at pattern recognition. If the human has put in all the information, so it looks like it mimics life, the human did it, and that is still life. It's like a copy, like a fake Picasso. Um, and so I think that that we need to apply a very stringent set of criterion, or a very not no, because that goes back to the definition. We need to apply a very stringent application of the scientific method to detect life from non-life, and say, right, is this complex? Can we count the parts that are complex? Can we then count the copy number? Okay, great. It's above the threshold. So this can't have appeared by chance. Now let's look for a mechanism. What is the mechanism in the assembly space? Invariably, the mechanism in assembly theory that gives rise to complexity is autocatalysis. But the nice thing that we just found out is that in assembly spaces, autocatalysis emerges spontaneously without us having to add it in, which is mind blowing. So it looks like when selection occurs in an assembly space, autocatalysis, as the assembly index goes up, is a necessary outcome, and that's something that I'm trying to understand right now. It's quite confusing.
I see. And another question: how do you balance the ethical implications of creating life with scientific benefits?
What are the ethical implications beyond anything else? Because the thing is, let me say, if I light a Bunsen burner, I'm burning oxygen in the atmosphere and fossil fuel. Is there an ethical objection to that? And then what is the basis for it? So when what is happening right now is people seem to be basically generating lots of random reasons, and to come up with on the guise of ethics. And I mean, I didn't really understand this till just recently, but it would appear that people that are generally talking about ethics are actually just trying to suppress um, progress. I mean, what I would advocate for is like understanding of the hazards associated with the experiment, and then the type of life forms we're trying to make are so feeble, they're so weak, they're not going to escape. They're not going to magically escape the test tube and do anything. They'll fall apart in 20 seconds. 100%. There's more danger doing synthetic biology than there is doing origin of life or an artificial life research. But yet, people don't seem to understand that. It's a bit like saying if you build a TV in the era of the cathode ray tube, you remember the time before LCDs, you had these vacuum chambers and an electron gun. Everyone go, what is this ethical? Could it suddenly open up a black hole? Of course not. I'm just firing an electron beam at a phosphor. And I think that it's really interesting that people who aren't qualified just make stuff up. And that is no reason to have an ethics panel. That's reason to say to people, please stop making stuff up and come with a reasoned argument about why I should be worried. So I can give you one worry, maybe, about some life. Maybe we generate a self-organizing system that can copy itself, and maybe it's using material that's common on Earth. So let's say rust. There's a lot of rust everywhere. Say that we make a molecule that can replicate itself in the presence of rust and makes more rust or something.
Do you think artificial life could one day evolve independently from human intervention?
What do you mean by then? That's not artificial life. That's just new life. That's just origin of life, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Could new life appear on Earth? Yeah. If Earth it got extinguished of all life tomorrow from some freak accident, life would probably start again, 100%.
Right. And do you foresee maybe a future where artificial intelligence designs entirely new molecules without anyone's help, actually?
Um, New molecules without anyone's help? No. No, let's qualify. I think that artificial intelligence and Gen AI could design new molecules that have never been made before, but are entirely conceivable from the data set, right? It's a bit like saying, could AI generate a new prime number? No, it doesn't understand prime numbers. Could AI randomly type a number that's prime? Sure, because it knows the number, it knows the digits 0 to 9. And I think that the same thing applies to molecules. It can put together digits, but whether they're new, interesting or not, is another question. I think AI itself is a very interesting way of doing a search of what is explicit and implicit in your data set. But it's intrinsically looking backwards. So it doesn't invent anything new ever. It invents, or it combines things into new things that you may be fooled into thinking are new. And that's okay, that's good. But we shouldn't be um, confused that that is the same as really new. I'm not being very clear here. It's like kind of this AI new, which is predictable from the data set, and there is human being doing something really interesting that you would never predict if you had 100 billion years of compute. Maybe something coming up, some new poetry, a new Bitcoin. There are new Bitcoin that's being made every day, right? Shit coins or whatever they're called, and the Gen AI cannot predict those. In fact, Gen AI cannot predict anything that's not in the past. So by definition, Gen AI can only predict the past. It cannot predict the future.
So basically, you believe that people should not be scared of artificial general intelligence, and basically that AGI will harm people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think AGI is possible in silicon. AGI is only possible with 4 billion years of evolution and a brain that's been wandering around the savannah and in the ocean and has to basically contemplate its own death over many and many generations and evolve in these inherent traits. Human living systems have two incredibly interesting things, or three, or four, or five. The first one of the five is the morphology of the cell. The second one is the genome. The third one is the epigenome, right? And then the fourth one is instinct, right? Creatures have instinct. And the fifth one is intelligence. Those instincts have been grown over billions of years. And even human beings now, we have instincts, right? We're attracted to people, we run away from people, we behave in ways that we don't quite understand. And then we have to basically pretend in our conscious brain that we can rationalize it and say, oh, I'm sorry, I was a racist. I'm like, no, no, no. Evolution made you a racist. What does that mean? Well, evolution made you not look at your in crowd and your out crowd to make sure you're safe. So when people have a trauma response to the outsiders, sure, in our modern society they're racist, but actually the roots of that come from evolution to quite quick decisions to work out whether you're going to live or die or not, right? And so, and we are now being able to understand that and question that. But it's so fascinating. AI does not have any of this. It has a human being training it on some data. It has no intrinsic agency. All the agency and all the AIs come from the human beings. And any computer scientist that tells you any different is scamming you and making stuff up.
Yeah, I mean, because some scientists say that like AGI will be conscious. So
That's an act of religious control. What is a religion? A religion is a belief in a system that we use to get people to conform to a certain set of ideologies, right? Some religions seem to be quite benign. I don't think anyone is thinks that being, I don't know, a Buddhist is offensive in any way, right? Some of the other religions where there's like wars and things, and laws you have to obey that people get confused by. But I think the thing is, these people that talk about an AGI and it will be conscious and it will do this, that's not falsifiable, right? And I think the problem is that we need to, and this will be my next step beyond assembly theory, will be a build a theory that explains and predicts consciousness in a experimentally determinable way that's rigorous. So we can make a consciousness detector that is not merely a Turing test, which is like, yeah, I think so. the thing that we see is like people are now beginning to say, "Oh, I think you wrote your essay using ChatGPT." That's the wrong statement. The statement is, "Oh, thank you for your essay. Please help me understand the abstractions that you built in your essay." Whereas a probabilistic machine doesn't build abstractions, it just basically generates stuff that makes you think it's good. So when you, as a reader, try and understand the deep abstractions and things and the motivations, it's probably going to be pretty easy to see AI generated intentions or fake intentions from real ones. But when I make these statements, some people vigorously agree and some people vigorously disagree. I would say, I mean, I've written AIs, I've written quite interesting algorithms that basically generate complexity and are exciting. But I think is that there are the computer scientists today who are saying these things are actually acting in bad faith, and they need to stop because we've spent a couple of hundred years saying question religion. If someone says to you, "Be good," what does that mean? Or you will go to hell, right? What do those statements mean? What does good mean, and what does hell mean? And then hell invokes the afterlife. And if you're a critical person, you can go, "Oh yeah, probably there's no life after death. Probably there's good is relative, right? Because we want to be nice to each other. We don't want to kill each other. We want to cooperate." And when it comes to AGI, someone says it will become conscious and it will know things you don't know. That is not evidenceable in any way I know, and therefore it's bad science.
What makes a protocell a promising candidate for studying the origin of life?
Huh? Is a protocell what makes a protocell? Okay, I'm going to answer your question precisely because obviously you mean something by it. I would say a protocell that could conceivably be created under natural conditions, like with simple lipids that can basically be born, I don't know, in some inorganic material in the sand, and a water air solid interface, and that protocell had basically simple lipids, and it was possible to containerize some chemical reaction on the inside from the outside, and that such that it would help accelerate selection. Because I think cells do a number of things. They help give individuality, which is great because you need it for evolution, and they also help you survive in a harsh environment, so things are reliable. But they also, if new things happen, they can containerize those new things, and you can effectively, um, you know, uh, be efficient, if you like, at evolving, right? So I think a protocell would need to have all those things. I don't know if protocells are a necessary requirement for selection. They probably accelerate it and increase the robustness greatly because if you've just got big networks of molecules interacting in a large space, you can imagine diluting it and disrupting it would kill those networks or prevent them from becoming as complicated as you need to get to a properly evolving system. Because highly evolving life, is more autonomous than lower life. Like a virus is alive, is just not very autonomous on its own because it's going to a cell. It's a bit like some animals are alive, but without plants providing nitrogen and carbon that's fixed from the atmosphere, they're not alive. So this symbiotic kind of parasitic or whatever relationships you have across the living system are very interwoven.
And do you believe that synthetic cells can have practical applications outside of understanding life's origins?
Yeah, I mean, I've played around with the ideas of making semi-synthetic carbon fixing machines, right? That I could just put in the ocean. And then the ethical concern would be like we talked about it earlier. One ethical concern would like, let's say we genetically engineer inorganic life form to take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And that would be cool, right? It literally would be good. But if this organism took all the carbon out of the atmosphere, that would not be cool. We'd all die. And so what you want to do is like, so if you could make a almost living system that can't evolve without on its own, but it can be released like a machine that will have a half life of a few hours or days or months or years, that might be a good application. You could also maybe make protocells that are basic computing devices, like a wearable computer, and maybe use them to kind of, tell what's going on inside you. Like, I mean, I just made that up, but that would be pretty cool. You could also use protocells, put sensors in them, to biological sensing systems based upon ion transport to help move information around in the environment, maybe to barcode the environment. But I've been involved in a lot of protocell research, trying to invent new technologies. But I think it will just there might be protocells that are good at, I don't know, manufacturing antibiotics or something. I just don't know.
Mhm. And do you think that synthetic biology can help us address environmental challenges like pollution or climate change?
Yeah, certainly for sure. I think synthetic biology is a tremendous technology and we should use it. And there are risks with geoengineering. What you would do, I think, is I would maybe engineer a shadow biology, and we release that and understand what niche it works in. But right now, everyone's panicking or generating a drama on, you might have seen this on making mirror image life. And there's all these people that started working on it, and now they've said, "Oh, no, we're going to stop. It's too dangerous." And that's nonsense. Like, I don't even know. I'm like, they're chiral racists. I mean, maybe they're not. I'm sure they meaning well in the same way with the AI doomers. But what they failed to do was convince me in their argument that mirrored life represented a danger, because mirror life is not, it can interact with biology, right? It might be that our enzymes and some of our systems will not be able to, take down all the molecules, but not everything has chirality in it, right? And so I'm like, why are they doing this? For attention, for generating some interesting ethical debate? You know, I think that science needs to proceed at pace, and I think there's significant problems that humans need to solve now, and we need to generate the capability to solve future problems that may come rather quickly. One of the things I'm very proud of the human race for how it invented the COVID-19 vaccine so quickly. That was amazing. Now I know there's all these conspiracy theories and all that other rubbish, but the statistics clearly show the vaccines saved millions of people. They also allowed us to unlock our environment so we could stop lockdown very quickly. And they also produced a brand new technology that is going to allow us to do things like gene therapy and build new vaccines. That rapid set of expansion, it was almost like the era when aeroplanes were being played with, and they suddenly everyone realized the right configuration of a passenger plane and made it safer and safer and safer. And that doesn't mean to say that these systems are perfectly safe. Nothing ever is. It's about the balance of risk. So, I'm pretty impressed with the bioengineering that we call the COVID-19 vaccine, and that was great. And I'm glad we did it.
Mhm. And do you believe there is a universal chemistry that underpins like all possible forms of life?
Um, I'm not sure what you mean there. What you mean, like other chemistry that gives rise to life, or there is a.
Like one ultimate language of chemistry that covers all kinds of life, forms of life.
I mean, as a chemist, we do chemical reactions, and I mean, I've been building in my lab and in my company a universal programming language for chemistry, and it covers everything. So there's no limitation, right? Although I kind of make a joke about organic chemistry and inorganic chemistry. So inorganic chemists are like veterinarians. They have to understand all the animals, right? So they're generalists. And organic chemists are like human doctors, and they are specialized in human, and then they're ring fenced around there. So I think that's kind of interesting. But when it comes to all life, I mean, all intelligent life is going to master chemistry, and probably all intelligent life is going to master particle physics and mathematics. So maybe there's something like that. I mean, I would go a level higher and say, what language will all intelligent life get to in the end? Will we be able to communicate with each other just because we've evolved for so long and we're looking in the universe and doing science? And although we are very weird and contingent, and they might have a different number of arms or legs or different chemistry or something, the fact is we'll be able to exchange information because we understand numbers and prime numbers and functions and something like that. I don't know, but I'm guessing that there will be some, but there is still the Fermi paradox.
What are your thoughts on panspermia as an explanation for life on Earth?
I think it's unsatisfactory because then where does that life start, right? And it also appears that for selection to occur to really make complex systems, you need rocky planets, high density of material. In this case, on Earth, some water, some solvent, some other stuff. So I think panspermia really doesn't solve any problems, and it also doesn't create any opportunities. Right? Life could have emerged on planet Earth easily from zero to now. Right? It does. I don't think panspermia gives us anything.
Mhm. And do you think there is like a fundamental difference between human-made and naturally occurring life?
Yes, because naturally occurring life had to go through evolutionary processes, and evolution is different to intelligence. But evolution produced intelligence, and then intelligent human beings were able to then go, oh, I can move this DNA from here and do this and do this and do this. So they're able to kind of almost make more sophisticated technology without having to do all the trial and error. Because evolution could get there, but it needs more trial and error. And I think intelligence and evolution are the same thing, but over very different timescales. And intelligence is fun because it allows people like you and me to communicate complex ideas in real time. And I could ask you to do something that you wouldn't do ordinarily, and you go, "Oh, that's a good idea. I can do that." And then I've affected the way you interact with the world by using words, and evolution can't do that.
Yeah, and how will your work influence pharmaceutical development in the coming years?
Well, there's two answers to that. I mean, or three. First one is my joke was I started the origin of life experiments in my lab, and I couldn't get any funding, so I had to start discovering drugs. So I kind of in my lab, I'm kind of doing some new digitization of chemistry, AI, and drug and origin of life. But in my company that I started a couple of years ago, we are digitizing chemistry and using. Well, I suppose what we're doing in my company is we've built this infrastructure to make any molecule, and then on that infrastructure we're doing machine learning to learn how to do all the chemistry. And that is allowing us to invent new molecules that just simply weren't possible by anyone else. So it's kind of crazy the technology that I've built in my lab that's gone into my company is actually able to generate the most sophisticated molecules ever built by human beings. And I'm not even a hardcore organic chemist.
Yeah, and what do you think about the field of quantum chemistry, and where do you see the field of chemistry heading in the next 20 years?
Yeah, I think quantum chemistry is a great area, right? And the quantum methods have always been very useful for chemistry, particularly if you're looking at small atom systems, like if you're looking at hydrogen, helium, diatomics, triatomics, that we can get almost not complete solutions because you can't get anything complete for other than hydrogen for the reasons of many configurations. But quantum methods can give you very precise information about spectroscopy and energy and stability. And I think that obviously, as the number of electrons and atoms scales, you have this very hard dependence on it. Then, as you number up, it just kind of goes wild, right? It's at least exponential, maybe even worse. I think using some methods, like some machine learning methods, you might even be able to take that exponential rise and make it a little bit more linear. And if you can make it a little bit more linear and get the precision we get from quantum methods using quantum machine learning or something, then we're going to be able to design molecules in silico and predict their properties just better and better and better. But the way to do it and the way I'm doing it in my lab and in my company, we use quantum machine learning or a quantum computation, whatever that is. Well, computation is the act of making something for real. Quantum is the act of calculating the physical properties. And then what you do is you get the molecule out at the end and you measure the physical property. Let's say we design a blue molecule, so we do all the quantum predictions and make sure the HOMO-LUMO gap is in the blue. We're then able to realistically come up with the right chemical structure, and then we compute that. That is, we make it. And then we measure the color. And if the color's not quite blue, but maybe slightly on the purple side, then we know we've mixed up, we've actually shifted into other colors. And so we can go around again and improve. And this type of approach using quantum methods and maybe a bit of machine learning, it will allow us to have the precision of quantum with the practicality of just doing active learning, machine learning. So I think that's going to help a lot, and it's going to be exciting to then apply that to more complex systems, complex reaction dynamics, biological systems, and then go further and further out.
Hmm. And my final question: what would you consider the most exciting discovery that could come from your work, and maybe in terms of your legacy?
Legacy. Oh my god. Um, I can tell you the two things I'm trying to do, and whether they're important or not is for you to decide and people listening. I don't think about legacy. I think about messing with people's minds in the future. That's kind of cool. So I would love for us to understand the origin of life, the origin of consciousness, right? If you like, and the abstraction, right, and intelligence. I think those three things: origin of life, abstraction, consciousness, intelligence. Sorry, four things are the same problem at different levels of emergence, because you have conscious origin of life comes first, then you probably have instinct for evolution, and then a little bit of intelligence, and then you have abstraction and a little bit of language, and then you have intelligence and problem solving. So I'd love to help humanity understand what those things mean on one level. And the other one, for the work where we're building computers and doing computation, I would hope that we would suddenly, finally, be able to do pretty much all chemistry in the lab cheaply on computers in academia, robot, and that a computer is a robot that can run a programming language to do chemistry, and I call that process computation. And my company is harnessing computation. There are other companies as well using computation, and that would be awesome, because that will help us make molecules when we go to the moon, go to Mars, and also help chemists just make more molecules rather than have to do all the manual work again and again and again. And I guess if I do those two things, origin of life, origin of instinct, stroke abstraction, or origin of intelligence and origin of consciousness, that would be cool. Combined with making a company and a technology that can program chemistry, then I think that's a reasonable day's work. And I'll need to think of something else to do in my retirement. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I can retrain as a computer scientist and make a quantum AI.
Why not?
I mean, yeah, why not? The field is moving, right?
Professor Cronin, thank you for your time and for this wonderful and very, very interesting conversation.
Thank you so much for your lovely questions. I thought they were really good, and it was a pleasure to speak to you.